Ryu was just an ordinary teenager until one day, his life ended in a sudden accident with a truck. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a strange, endless white space, completely unsure of what was happening. As he tried to make sense of it, a tall, blond man appeared before him and calmly explained the situation. Ryu had died. Shocked, Ryu recalled the accident and asked if this person was God. The man shook his head and said he was more like an angel, here to guide him to another world. The angel told him that in this new life, he could live however he wanted. Ryu, who never cared much for adventure or glory, simply wished for a slow and peaceful life. The angel agreed without hesitation and revealed that in the next world, around 20% of humans could use magic. As for Ryu, he was given a natural talent for water magic. To match his wish for a quiet life, the angel arranged for Ryu to start in a safe house deep within a forest. It was protected by a barrier to keep monsters away and stocked with food that would last him for 2 months. Hearing this, Ryu felt relieved, as if everything had been set up perfectly for his new beginning. Soon after, Ryu awoke in the forest house. Excited to test his abilities, he went outside and discovered that he could summon water instantly just by imagining it. No chants or complicated rituals. His thoughts alone were enough. Curious, he explored the house and found some frozen meat stored in a cold room, a knife, and 2 beginner books, one about local monsters and another about the plants in the region. There was also an empty bath, which quickly gave him an idea. He wanted to enjoy hot water, but the water he created was only at room temperature, so he tried to make a fire instead. First, he attempted to rub sticks together, but without the skill or strength, it was hopeless. Then he thought of another approach. If he could freeze water into ice, he might be able to shape it into a lens and use the sun's rays to start a fire. Focusing carefully, he imagined the water molecules bonding tightly as the heat was drawn away, and he managed to create solid ice. He then carved it into a sphere, forming a lens. By directing sunlight through it, he finally succeeded in lighting a fire. That night, he filled the bath, heated the water, and enjoyed his first proper soak in this world. Relaxing in the warmth, Ryu realized something important. If he applied the principles of science to his magic, he could push it far beyond normal limits. The next morning, after a simple breakfast of dried meat, he began training in offensive magic. He started by firing water balls at a tree. His aim was accurate, but the impact was too weak to cause any real damage. Next, he tried a concentrated water jet, but it lacked force and barely reached the tree. To him, it just looked like water trickling out of his hand. For a moment, he felt like giving up, but then he remembered what the angel had told him. Magic was guided by imagination and could only improve with practice. With that in mind, Ryu decided to keep training patiently, determined to strengthen his water techniques. That night, Ryu was able to generate hot water directly. The next day, he tried creating ice crystals out of thin air, because he had always wanted to use an icicle lance. However, shooting an icicle was even harder than shooting water. Still, he continued to practice it along with his other water magic variations. Days passed, and he became more skilled at using both water and ice. One day, he headed into the forest to hunt for food. He explored the area and gathered some herbs, planning to return home. But just then, he noticed an angry boar staring at him. Ryu froze in terror as the boar charged at him, and he barely dodged at the last moment. The beast crashed into a tree, knocking it down, and Ryu gathered his courage to fight back. He froze the ground in front of the boar, making it slip. As it slid toward him, he created multiple sharp icicles pointing ahead. The boar ran straight into them and was instantly killed. At night, Ryu checked his monster guide and found that boars were considered the weakest type of monsters. He then noticed that, although the book described only beginner-level creatures, 2 special entries appeared at the end. The first was about dragons, beings powerful enough to burn entire cities. The advice was to run immediately if one appeared. The second entry was about demons, creatures of unknown origin, and the book warned that encountering one meant certain death. The next day, Ryu left his clothes behind and went into the forest again. This time, an assassin hawk attacked him. He barely avoided its first strike, but the bird then launched invisible wind slashes at him. Ryu realized the monster was far beyond his ability. He ran, creating ice blocks behind him to block the attacks, and fired water jets, but the hawk dodged them all. The bird charged at him, but Ryu created an ice wall at the last moment to block it. The hawk lost one of its eyes in the collision and retreated. While escaping, Ryu lost his sense of direction. Trying to find his way back, he suddenly discovered a glowing lake. On its surface stood a headless knight and a headless horse. The knight turned toward him, and Ryu was stunned. Ryu managed to return home safely and continued exploring the forest afterward, fighting stronger monsters and mastering his attack magic. At night, he went back to the glowing lake, where the headless knight was waiting for him. Ryu could not find any information about headless riders or Dullahans in his book, and he wondered if it was because they were either high-level monsters or not considered monsters at all. Regardless, he decided to spar against it. He attacked with a sword made of ice, but he could not land a single strike. The knight struck back again and again, and Ryu had to block every blow with his ice shield. Eventually, he grew exhausted and fell to the ground, but the knight did not finish him. Instead, it seemed to be training him. As Ryu stood up, the knight approached, carrying a small crystal knife. It coated the blade in water and froze it, turning it into a sword of ice. The knight handed the sword to Ryu, wordlessly telling him to master this technique. Not long after, Ryu encountered the assassin hawk again. This time, it had evolved into a stronger version of itself, but had also lost its eyesight. The bird sent out powerful wind slashes, and Ryu raised ice walls to block them. Even so, the attacks tore through his defenses, forcing him to retreat. The hawk suddenly accelerated and charged at him. Ryu barely managed to stop it by stacking multiple ice shields in front of himself. He tried to counter with icicles, but they failed to land. Then, the hawk used a sonic attack that shattered his shields in an instant. Before he could recover, the hawk struck him with a thunderbolt. It then swooped down to finish the battle. At that moment, Ryu drew his crystal sword and managed to parry the attack. He even cut through the bird's invisible wind slashes, and when it rushed at him again, he stabbed it through the chest. The hawk crashed to the ground. Ryu walked toward it, realizing they had crossed paths only twice, but in those moments had formed a bond. He thanked the hawk for driving him to grow stronger, then pulled the sword free, letting it die peacefully. Just as he began heading home, a dragon appeared. Ryu thought it was the end for him, but instead, the dragon spoke to him through telepathy. The dragon asked Ryu if he had seen a black hawk. Ryu panicked, thinking he might have just killed the dragon's servant, but instead of getting angry, the dragon remained calm and even praised Ryu for his achievement. It then noticed the weapon in Ryu's hand and pointed out that it was rare, the sword of the Fairy King. Ryu could hardly believe it. Wanting to learn more about the world, he spoke with the dragon, who introduced himself as Lewin. The two of them talked throughout the day, and by evening, Lewin told Ryu they might meet again someday before flying off. Meanwhile, the angel who had reincarnated Ryu noticed something unusual. After checking Ryu's status again, he realized he had overlooked a detail. Ryu carried a hidden trait, eternal youth. In the angel's 10,000 years of service, only one other person had ever possessed such a trait. Weeks later, Ryu began craving seafood and went to the beach. There, he was shocked to discover a wrecked ship. Among the wreckage, he found a lifeless man. But then, he heard a faint groan. Excited, he rushed over and found another man, still alive. This was the first human Ryu had encountered since coming to this world. The man's name was Abel. He remembered how a giant octopus monster had attacked his ship during a storm, throwing him into the sea. But when he opened his eyes again, he found himself inside Ryu's house. Relieved, Abel searched for survivors, but the place was empty. When Ryu approached him from behind, Abel was startled. Despite being a skilled warrior, he hadn't sensed Ryu's presence at all. Abel introduced himself and thanked Ryu for saving his life. Ryu replied that everyone else had already died when he found them. Abel said not to worry, since the others were smugglers. Before he could continue, Abel's stomach growled, and Ryu offered to share a meal with him. Inside, Abel quickly noticed Ryu's strange clothing and asked about it. Ryu explained that he had no other clothes and no fabric to make new ones. Abel suggested buying some, then realized that Ryu might be too poor to afford them. But Ryu told him that nobody else lived in this area anyway, easing the awkwardness. Abel then asked if Ryu hunted for food. Ryu confirmed and showed him his water magic, saying that he mostly relied on it. Abel was impressed, since only half the people in the world could use magic, and he was among the other half who couldn't. This surprised Ryu, because the angel had told him that only 20% of people could use it. Abel then asked Ryu to take him to the shore, because he needed to confirm something. On the way, he insisted that if they faced danger, he should be the one on the front lines. Ryu told him it wasn't necessary, but Abel didn't want to always be the one getting saved, so Ryu let him do as he wished. When they reached the broken ship, all of the bodies had vanished. Abel guessed that either monsters or the sea had taken them. He thanked Ryu once more for saving him, otherwise he too would have shared their fate. Abel explained that he couldn't find what he was looking for and now wanted to return to his friends. But since the storm had carried the ship far to the south, he had no idea which direction to take. Suddenly, he asked Ryu if he would come with him. Ryu was shocked, but Abel explained that with his help, he could find the way back. And in return, Abel would help him secure a job so that he could live in better conditions. Ryu thought it over and decided to accept. That evening, he looked at the small garden he had cultivated and felt a pang of sadness about leaving it behind. Later at night, he told Abel he was going out to say goodbye to someone. Curious, Abel wanted to ask who, but chose not to pry. Ryu went to the glowing lake one last time, where the headless knight was waiting. He thanked the knight for teaching him how to fight, and drew his knife, saying he would give everything in this final spar. The knight also raised its sword, and they clashed fiercely. After a long and exhausting battle, Ryu collapsed from fatigue. The knight returned silently to the lake. Before disappearing beneath the water, it turned back and summoned a magical suit of armor, leaving it for Ryu as a parting gift. Ryu accepted it gratefully, thanked the knight one last time, and returned home. The next morning, Ryu and Abel prepared for their journey. Ryu felt nostalgic about leaving the place he had spent so much time in, but he was ready to move forward. As they traveled through the forest, they soon encountered a wild boar. Abel asked Ryu to leave this one to him. He charged forward with his sword and unleashed a combat skill, instantly killing the beast. Ryu was amazed and asked what combat skills were. Abel explained that those who fought with weapons used special skills in battle. That night, the two camped in a hollow tree, and the next day continued their journey deeper into the forest. As they made their way through the forest, they came across lizard men near a swamp. Abel decided to avoid them, saying they were too strong to confront directly. But even after changing their route, Ryu could sense that the lizard men were following them. Abel drew his sword, preparing to fight. Ryu warned him that there were too many, and said he would fight as well. Abel thought Ryu couldn't handle it without a staff, but was stunned when Ryu suddenly summoned 4 icicle lances at once and struck down 4 lizard men immediately. After the battle, Abel asked about the spell he had used. Ryu said it was just the regular icicle lance. Abel explained that his wind mage friends could only cast 1 attack at a time, and was shocked to see Ryu summon multiple lances. Ryu brushed it off, saying that maybe it was just a difference between water and wind magic. They moved on, but before leaving, Ryu casually created 2 ice cups, filled them with water, and handed one to Abel. Abel noticed that Ryu had used a different incantation this time, but Ryu claimed Abel must have heard wrong. Abel then gave Ryu a coin. Excited, Ryu said this was the first time he had ever seen money. Abel was dumbfounded, realizing that Ryu wasn't just poor,
He had no experience with money at all. As they traveled, Abel explained that there were three major countries in the Central Plains: the Kingdom of Knightly, the Debi Empire, and the Handlu Federation. Ryu couldn't help but make fun of the name Debi Empire, but Abel ignored him and continued. Before long, they entered a wide clearing. Suddenly, a nearby rock began to move. Abel reacted instantly, slashing it in half. At the same time, Ryu raised a water shield to block sharp stones flying toward them. They had walked into a nest of rock golems. Abel dashed forward and struck one, piercing its body. But the wound immediately closed, and the golem counterattacked. Abel retreated, realizing normal attacks would not work against them. Ryu then had an idea. He created a massive block of ice above the golems and dropped it down, crushing them. Abel was astonished. He had never seen magic used like that. Ryu continued the same way, dropping ice blocks until the golems were defeated. Among them, they discovered a larger rock golem containing a huge magic stone. Abel said it would sell for a high price. Ryu wanted to collect stones from the others as well, but since they were buried under ice, he left them behind.
They continued their journey and soon came across a gigantic creature that looked like a mix between a crocodile and a hippopotamus. Abel identified it as a behemoth, a rare and extremely powerful monster he had never seen before. Ryu asked if they should try to hunt it, but Abel quickly told him that such a thing was impossible. Before they could retreat, several wyverns appeared. Ryu grew excited, thinking they were about to witness a battle between monsters. The wyverns attacked first, launching rocks through magic at the behemoth, but the behemoth simply roared and the magic was canceled instantly, causing the wyverns to crash to the ground. Watching this, Ryu realized that the creature must possess a magic cancellation skill. Later that evening, as they sat down to eat, Abel asked him more about what he had mentioned. Abel had only heard of certain traps and dungeons that could cancel magic, but never of a monster being able to do so. When Ryu heard about dungeons, he became excited. Abel explained that there was a dungeon in the city of Lan, which was where they were heading. Ryu grew annoyed, demanding to know why Abel hadn't told him something so important earlier, and asked if he was hiding anything else. In response, Abel asked if Ryu at least knew about dwarves and elves. Ryu admitted that he didn't and told Abel to explain. A few days later, they reached a mountain range. Ryu said that once they crossed, they would find human settlements. Abel asked how he could be so certain. Ryu considered telling him that a dragon had given him this knowledge, but in the end, he kept it a secret, saying only that it was information beyond human comprehension. Soon after, they heard a strange sound and prepared themselves. A griffin descended from the sky, and both of them froze in fear. Abel nearly panicked, but Ryu quickly threw a piece of meat into the air. Abel followed his lead, tossing another. The griffin caught both pieces and flew away. The two of them sighed in relief, knowing that if they had tried to fight, they would not have survived. As they continued, Abel remarked that no human had seen behemoths or griffins in over 100 years. He suggested that the tall mountains must be blocking them from reaching human settlements. That reminded Ryu of the wyverns they had seen earlier, and he guessed their nest must be nearby. He was right. Before long, they found several wyverns feeding on a monster. Ryu wanted to fight, but Abel warned him that it normally took at least 20 experienced adventurers to handle creatures as strong as wyverns. Ryu replied that they couldn't avoid fighting them forever, and asked if it would help if the wyverns were pinned to the ground. Abel said that if they couldn't fly, he could defeat one in close combat. Ryu stepped forward and chanted a long incantation, though in truth he was only pretending. At the end of the chant, he summoned 4 icicles and drove them into the wyvern's wings, pinning them down. Abel seized the chants and struck, killing them. Before they could relax, 2 more wyverns appeared. This time, Ryu summoned icicles without chanting anything, pinning them down as well. Abel noticed the difference and grew suspicious, but pushed it aside for the moment as he finished off the remaining monsters. After the battle, they collected the magic stones from the wyverns and continued their journey north.